welcome everyone to not our first program directors panel, but the first virtual program directors panel hosted by the Virginia College of Emergency Physicians and the Virginia Medical Student Council. I am Sarah Mattis-Marshall, Executive Director for VACEP, and co-hosting with me today are Dr. Bruce Lowe, who is our Education Chair and Immediate Past President, as well as Quan Phan, who is the President of the Virginia Medical Student Council. Points of order, please put any comments you have in the chat and any questions in the Q&A. We will be monitoring them throughout to relay them to our panelists and our hosts. Okay, so first off, we'll have some introductions from our hosts, which are yours truly, and then we'll have some introductions from our panelists as well. We'll move then to the moderated panel discussion, and then we'll have time for live Q&A. At that point, you will be able to unmute yourself and answer questions by audio, or you can keep putting them into the chat and Q&A. So a little bit about VACEP. We are 1,000 members strong. We have 150 medical student members, and we are the largest emergency medicine organization in Virginia. We are very strong in advocacy. Recently, we have our bill to end surprise billing passed in the House this March before everything went crazy. And we've been fighting most recently to reverse a Medicaid reimbursement budget amendment and working to protect our members during this pandemic and beyond. We also offer education and networking opportunities, member benefits, updates and access to industry information, and leadership and volunteer opportunities. It's a great way for you as medical students to learn more about the profession of emergency medicine in Virginia and also to get involved in advocacy. So I'll hand it over to Quan and talk a little bit about MSC.
Hi, I'm Quan. I'm the chair of the Virginia Medical Student Council. We're a collection of representatives from the state medical schools, and we're working together to network from all the different communities to provide access to different opportunities and resources such as promotion of education on EM topics, assistance in navigation of the match and residency application process, such as this panel that we're putting on tonight, and then encouraging interest in emergency medicine. It's a growing field and we're very excited about it. We have an email and Facebook that you can connect with us, and we're trying to create representatives at all the medical schools, so reach out and find out who that person is and we can get you in contact with us. Thanks for coming tonight.
Okay, so a little bit about what you can do, and as a reminder, we will send these slides and some follow-up information after the panel, but we have a lot of ways for medical students to get involved. You can check your membership status with ACEP and EMRA. You can bookmark our websites, come to our events, follow us on social media. Check the 10 under 10, which is a section where we have 10 actions you can do in under 10 minutes or less. Sometimes they're a little bit more, but there are kind of quick ways to get involved and get engaged. And you can email me at sarah@vacep.org if you have any questions. So at this point, I will hand it off to Dr. Bruce Lowe, who will lead our panel discussion.
Great. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Sarah. First off, I want to thank Sarah and Quan for all their hard work for organizing and putting this event together tonight. Most of you guys who are on tonight are M4s or fourth-year med students, and so this webinar will be directed mainly towards you guys. So definitely any questions that you have, especially as we talk about the residency process for this year especially, please feel free to chime in and ask. You know, it's an exciting time being a fourth-year med student, right? You're almost done with school, about to start residency, a new chapter in your life. It's also a little bit stressful, right? About going through the application process. And of course, this year, there's a little thing called COVID-19. It's definitely put a little bit of a wrinkle that none of us have been through. This is new for all of us. No doubt it's added another layer of stress and unknowns for all of us, not just for you guys as applicants, but even for, as you'll hear, our panelists, we're all kind of going through this new for us too. I do want to welcome our panelists. Just a quick introduction. So we have Dr. Damon Keel, who's the program director at Virginia Tech Carilion in Roanoke, Virginia. We have Dr. Joel Mole, who's the program director at VCU in Richmond, Virginia. We have Dr. Barry J. Knapp, who is the program director at Eastern Virginia Medical School in Norfolk, Virginia. He's one of my partners. We have Dr. Kevin Knoop, who is the program director at Riverside Regional in Newport News, Virginia. And we have Dr. Amita Suter, who's the program director at UVA in Charlottesville, Virginia. Thank you, everybody, for being here. So I have some questions I'm going to kind of shoot off, and then what I'll do is I'll kind of pick on our panelists and kind of see what their responses are. So first off, the questions have to do around rotations. So Amita, I'm going to kind of start off with you. So how many rotations would you recommend for this year for students to do? And for those who don't have an emergency medicine residency program at their school, what do you think is their take or strategy in terms of trying to do outside rotations? Oh, Amita, I think you're muted.
This is obviously a really challenging year for people to be able to do rotations, and I know there's a lot of institutional differences in terms, like for example, we are not allowed to have any rotating students, including those that come from programs without a residency. So I think that you want to have one SLO from an emergency medicine program, whether that's your home program or if you are from a institution that doesn't have a residency, from ideally you were able to rotate somewhere else. But if you weren't, I think that things are going to be much more forgiving this year. And so if your SLO or your letter is from a program that is your home medical school and doesn't have a residency, I think that's not going to reflect poorly on you, because I think all of us as program directors understand the constraints that you're working under. I don't know if anyone else has a different take on it, but I think I'm looking for one EM letter in a SLO format as like kind of the minimum.
Sure. Damon, any other thoughts?
Yeah, it's still, that's not going to change from program director's perspective, that the SLO is still the measure of the student at the interview or at the applicant level. And it's been so ingrained in us that getting that, I've actually been surprised about hearing about how many students from orphan schools that don't have access to EM programs have gotten away rotations. We're also in the same boat as UVA, which we cannot accept any away students, including orphans that we traditionally have done a really good job of getting in. If you can't or have not been able to get a SLO, I think it then very much, you've got to get some outside perspective from emergency medicine, and it really has to focus specifically on your candidacy compared to other applicants who are going into emergency medicine, which is of course the SLO. But if you cannot get a hold of one of those, then see if you can't find a place that can do a secondary SLO, the ultrasound, PEDS, EMS ones. Those still might be available come this fall. And the nice thing is you still got some opportunities there because of the late release of ERAS. So.
Great, thank you. And just to make sure everybody understands, SLO stands for the Standardized Letter of Evaluation. It literally is a standardized form that's used as an evaluation form that all EM programs look to when evaluating potential residents on their rotation. Speaking of SLO and letters of recommendations, Barry, I'm going to turn this question next to you. How many letters of recommendations or SLO do you think, or would you recommend students try to get for this year? And then the follow-up question to that is, for non-EM type SLOs or letter recommendations, do you think they play a value more this year than previous years? And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that really the expectation is that students only have one standard letter of evaluation. And as they're just going through the process, that's available through CORD. It's pushed through ERAS and can really only be written by an academic emergency physician that is practicing with a residency program. And traditionally, with multiple rotations that students would have, they would have multiple SLOs or E-SLOs that would come from other institutions. And unfortunately, with those away rotations being canceled for most, that's not going to be available. So the OSLO became available for off-service rotations to make it easier for your off-service letter writers to write a letter that might be slanted towards emergency medicine physicians and program directors who are used to that format. So I think and then there's the traditional letter that some will provide as well. I think that the traditionally emergency medicine program directors have put high value on the ESLOs as they directly reflect the performance that a student has had in the emergency department. But there's going to be added value to the OSLO in the standard letter of recommendation, just based on the fact that this year's package of recommendations and grades, et cetera, are really going to have to be looked at as more of a whole, as opposed to putting all or most of the emphasis on the ESLOs.
Gotcha. So it sounds like trying to get at least one of the ESLOs, but if you have to get an off-service one, try to get somebody to fill out maybe the OSLO, so the standardized form that's an off-service, and ideally maybe more directed toward, slanted toward emergency medicine. Kevin, any other thoughts, comments to that?
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. Kevin Knoop from Riverside, a new program at in Newport News. Happy to be the third in the Tidewater area hosting emergency medicine programs. We just have our first set of residents starting. We just started block 3 this week, so time is flying by. This is really, as Amita has suggested, this is really a difficult year for medical students applying for any specialty, but I think in particular emergency medicine. The environment has been constricted on so many different fronts by your own schools, by other institutions who would normally host rotations, by your family probably saying don't do it. Just a whole bunch of things that have constrained the environment. I think obviously you, as a student, you should try to get a SLO, definitely. And you know, there are programs, our program in particular, we do not have restrictions for residents who don't have you know, parent programs. We don't have our own medical school directly affiliated. We are affiliated administratively with VCU, and we also have affiliations with EVMS, but we're not, we don't fall under the constraints of that. So we are accepting medical students who want to do rotations. And we've had, of course, like many others, have had many cancellations. So this is really a hard situation for the students, because it's really left to the students to try to figure out, what can I do? But I agree wholeheartedly that you should get a rotation somewhere in an emergency department, preferably that has residents, so that the language of the SLO will be somewhat consistent. And I know probably some of you may be left with just doing a rotation in an emergency department somewhere without residents. That is better than nothing, but do everything you can to get a rotation. We have openings, I'll advertise, because of the cancellations. So we have capacity, and we don't have the restrictions that some of the other programs have.
Great, thank you. So it does sound like that some of the programs in Virginia can take outside students. So VCU, EVMS, Riverside, but it sounds like some of the other programs are not taking outside students because of restrictions from the institution.
Hey, Bruce, and I'll say we are evaluating that on a weekly basis, and if we open up to students from orphan programs, we will announce that as quick as possible. And I would say that's still an advantage to students, even if they're getting that you know, rotation done in December. So we're continuing to push for that. We will announce if we're able to do that, and we're looking at that on a weekly basis.
Great. So it sounds like with all things COVID, rapid changes. So definitely, especially those who don't have a residency program at your school, is to really kind of keep looking at the different schools, whether in Virginia or maybe even around the region, because situations may change where they're not accepting students now, but that may change in the near future. Great, thank you. Joel, next question is going to go to you, which is, what are your thoughts on virtual rotations? So a lot of programs around the country are offering virtual rotations. Do you think from a student perspective, it's helpful or not helpful, at least from an application applying to residency perspective?
I think you're probably going to get some maybe varied opinions on this. So it'd be interesting to see what my colleagues say. And by the way, thank you for saving the best for last. So I just have to put a groan right there to all my colleagues. No, I'm just kidding. So, I mean, I think the virtual interview stuff, I mean, the virtual rotations, you know, I think they have their place. I mean, clearly, you know, an in-person rotation is better. And I would say probably an in-person subspecialty rotation in emergency medicine. If you can do a tox rotation and maybe also do some time clinically, I would recommend that over a virtual rotation. Some people may not have anything. When COVID hit us, we were actually having our fourth-year students call us on the phone and putting them on the phone with patients to do histories and physicals. And I think that was helpful to help tee them up to do a better job during their AI that they're all on now, or that pretty much completed now. So I think that's something important, but I don't think it, you know, it's a new thing. We don't really know how to assess it. I'm not particularly overly impressed with it, but I don't think it would hurt you either. But if you have the opportunity to do it in person, definitely not.
Great. Damon, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, the away rotation is obviously an opportunity to show your stuff, but also get a sense of the institution. And for program directors, it's a measure of you compared to another place. It's also a time to sort of gauge the 3 a.m. test. How is this individual in terms of when it really gets crazy busy, their tolerance for nights, and we're not getting that picture on those away rotations that are virtual. That being said, any more contact you can get in emergency medicine is always going to be helpful, but I have really always advised our students, once you've decided emergency medicine is your career and you've got your SLO this year, grab derm, optho, urology, anything you can do there, because you're going to be doing emergency medicine for the rest of your career. You did well on your SLO, and that's really going to be the important piece. I agree with Joel. Some of the problems, I think there are a couple of student rotations out there from that are being offered that are really good, intense learning experiences, online and virtual. But I think a lot of them are filling in a gap and hoping that it's just a service offered. And I don't think those are a useful time if you can get home rotations in other specialties that would really help further your career in emergency medicine.
Yeah, having said that, I have heard that some places are severely limiting contact, so that a lot of people are doing a lot of their clinical stuff virtually now. And I mean, if that's the case for you, it is what it is. I mean, you have to do that and obviously do your best job. But if you can choose, I would definitely choose for it in person, even if it's not emergency medicine.
Great. Barry, any other thoughts?
Yeah, I concur with the other program directors. You know, I think the value of the away rotation is the fact that we get to know your personality. And in emergency medicine, it's all about fit for emergency medicine, because we know all of the grades, and it's how you fit in with the rest of our residents, the rest of the students as well, and vice versa. You know, us as a program, a very strong community-oriented program. You know, once I can get you to my campus and you meet the great people and the great residents that we have, I can convince you to sign on the dotted line right then and there, because that value is seen face-to-face on every rotation, in every shift that you do. So we really, really miss that. And I think programs are struggling as well as students is, how do I get my personality out there to let students know in a virtual environment? And I think it's a real challenge, but we'll try all the different methods that we can to get it.
Great, thank you. So next, I thought throughout this, throughout the webinar, we kind of will let each of the program directors do a little bit of introduction, not only to themselves, but maybe a little couple-minute plug about their program and maybe some highlights about their program. So Amina, if you want to kind of start off with us, talk about yourself a little bit and maybe the highlights at UVA, University of Virginia.
So I'm actually a product of my residency program. I went to med school with Bruce at UVA. I think we overlapped by a year, right? And then
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
did residency at UVA. Then did a med ed fellowship and stayed, and was on the faculty for I guess nearly 10 years, and I'm now the program director. So obviously I believe in the program and I love the program, or I wouldn't have stayed. A lot of really great programs in Virginia. So if you're looking to stay in Virginia, there are a lot of great options. I think each program has its own features that make it unique. We're a tertiary care center that gets a lot of transfers of very sick patients, and we're very busy. So I think what you're gonna get out of training at UVA is a lot of really complicated patients mixed in with kind of the bread and butter of emergency medicine, and you'll get comfortable taking care of all of those things at the same time. So you'll go from suturing a facial lac to taking care of a liver transplant patient with Vibrio sepsis. So you'll kind of see a little bit of everything. Not a lot of penetrating trauma, but a lot of blunt trauma because of all the highways that are around here. So you'll be comfortable working in any setting when you leave, and we can promise you a busy 3 years of residency. And although it's kind of in Central Virginia and a college town, we have a very diverse patient population. Charlottesville is a refugee resettlement center, so you're going to see people from all over the world, sometimes that have just come off a plane and have a fever, and so your differential is now a lot of tropical illnesses. So you'll get to see a lot of things that you might not see in other places. And then I think the other really great feature of our program is the residents come from all over the country, the faculty trained all over the country, and so you really get to see a lot of different perspectives on emergency medicine and different ways of doing things. So I thought it was a great place to train and a great place to work with a lot of great personalities, intellectually curious people.
Great, thank you. With that, I'm gonna give you the next question also, which is, we talked a little bit about rotations. What do you think about when you review this year applicants that applicants can do to make their applications stand out in particular?
Yeah, this is, I think, as someone else pointed out, a tough year for programs and for applicants to make yourself stand out. I mean, how much can you really tell about each other in a Zoom interview? I think people who have tried to do interesting things despite the constraints of what we're dealing with COVID, so a lot of research, clinical research especially, has been on hold in a lot of medical centers, but there are things that you can do. You could do a survey project, which is entirely online. Did you get involved with COVID volunteering in your community? So I think, maybe even like thinking about ways to like capitalize on what's going on right now, and try to use the fact that a lot of things have moved online to your advantage, and get involved in things that maybe you wouldn't be able to. Could you collaborate on a research project with another institution because everything's happening on Zoom right now? So kind of think creatively about what you can do to make yourself stand out. Use your faculty at your med school as a resource. Ask them for ideas. Not everybody needs to do research, but I think having some kind of project that showed that you didn't just, use the downtime when maybe you weren't on your clinical rotations to do something that's interesting and a little bit different this year. So, and as one example, a survey project is like a great use of your time right now.
Sure, great, thank you. Kevin, this next question is for you. When students that are interested in a program, do you feel it's worthwhile or more worthwhile this year that they contact you directly as a PD, or what's the best way that students can really show interest, especially if they are limited and can't do an audition rotation?
Yeah, that's a great question. As Barry, I think, noted, that determining the fit for the specialty is really important, and also not just the specialty, but for the program. I mean, programs are very different. There are academic programs, there are blended programs, there are community hospital programs, all of course training to the same requirement, but the outcomes, maybe the career trajectories are different. So I'm interested to find out from applicants why they're interested in emergency medicine, what led them to it, what experiences they've had to form that opinion for a career and why they would want to come to a place like Riverside, a new community hospital program that sees a lot of sick patients. So I kind of would encourage some contact in this particular year. I think last year I would say, please, I may not have time to answer your email, but this year is different. And would I want to get a robocall email from every applicant in the country? Absolutely not. If I look at an email that looks like it's a templated email, I'm probably not even going to respond to it. But if I look at an email that's got a message that resonates with our residency that I think that would be good to find out more about, I'm going to write that person back. So I probably will read the emails. But so this year I would say that, whereas before it's really not been entirely kosher because nobody had the time because of the number of applications and such. I think some other form of communication is helpful. And I would.
Great, thank you. Joel, what are your thoughts? Sorry, I put you on the spot there.
You did.
Oh, sorry, Joel. Joel, what are your thoughts on, in terms of contacting students, reaching out and contacting directly to programs this year? Do you think, Kevin was saying that probably more so important this year compared to other years because of COVID and restrictions, but want to kind of get your thoughts. Do you agree, disagree in terms of contact communication?
Yeah, so a couple things. Sorry, I didn't realize I put myself on mute. So a couple things. I'm the program director at VCU. I've been here for 6 years. I did not train here because it didn't exist. In fact, most of the programs in Virginia didn't exist when I trained. We've a very busy urban academic medical center with a huge vulnerable patient population. So we have kind of the mix of the county feel along with the leading academic clinical discovery. We see over 100,000 a year. We get over 4,000 traumas a year. We're the only burn center in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So a lot of high acuity and a lot of great training. Also important to us is being a diverse, inclusive, and an equitable program because we reflect or try to reflect the population we care for. So as far as your question, sorry, I had to get my plug in. As far as the question goes, I mean, I think you have to, you have to take it with caution, right? I love to get emails from students with questions to answer questions and see how I can help them. I like to hear about why they might be interested. If there's something on their application, like one of the classic things is, maybe they're applying to my residency program for some place that is not somebody we would typically take. A historical area that we just don't necessarily recruit a lot in that area. But then I find out, maybe their spouse or significant other, their families from, Richmond or from Virginia. And so those type of things I think really help when you're not able to put that in your ARIS application. So I think that communication is really important. I try to get back with everybody as much as I can. I agree definitely with Kevin that, this kind of rote, standard emails, there's nothing worse than like, addressing it to Amika, Anita, and sending it to me, right? Because then I know you're addressing it to every program director in the country, or Barry or Damon or Kevin or anybody from that standpoint. But I think you also have to make sure you're not stalking people because there's nothing worse than like sending me 12 emails in a month. That's probably going to be killing your chance right there. So I think you have to have a purpose to your email, and I think you have to make sure that you communicate ideally with the programs you're really interested in, and not just 265 programs.
Great. Barry.
Bruce, I'd be willing to share the personal cell phone numbers for all the program directors with any of the students that feel free to reach out. Just kidding, just kidding.
And we'll give them your address too, Barry.
Well, I'm sure actually most of the students here are like, what's an email? I need their text. Instagram.
Great, thank you. So one of the questions came up in our chat box, and a question, similar question I was going to ask is step 2. So what value do you think this year the step 2 for USMLE is going to play more of a value in terms of your evaluation, less, or the same as prior? And the second part of that question would be for our osteopathic students who may have not taken the USMLE so far this year, and just the COMLEX, do you think it is worthwhile, or should they consider or strongly consider taking the USMLE for this particular year, just because of challenges of not being able to do rotations and so forth. And Damon, I'll turf that question to you to start off with.
I just had this discussion with probably a core of 10 other PDs. We're working on a different educational project, and it was pretty unanimous amongst that group, which was, my God, take it early. It's a differentiating tool in the time of lack of differentiating tools. And it's still, if you look at previous program director surveys, the importance they place on different pieces between SLO and interview, right below there somewhere is step 2. That hasn't changed. So if you can get that in, that would be great. For the osteopaths, I also say, always look like an apple. We just want everybody in the bin to compare apples to apples. And if you're always looking like an orange because you didn't do something else, try to make yourself look more like all of the other apples in the bin. And that's just another piece of the puzzle. I know some people may have differing opinions. I'd love to hear it.
Great, thank you. Amita, what are your thoughts on the issue of USMLE Step 2, and then especially for our osteopathic students?
Yeah, I think if you're an osteopathic student, you're studying for the COMLEX, it's the same material, just take the USMLE. I don't think there's a downside to you taking it, and the upside is huge, which, as Damon said, it helps us compare apples to apples. So I wouldn't say that I would not look at an osteopath's application because they didn't take the USMLE, but it certainly makes it a lot harder for me to look at it because I'm just not familiar with the other scoring system. So I think, and then for MD students, again, you have to take step 2 at some point. You might as well take it early so that it shows up on ERS, because I think it's only an advantage. I really don't really care that much about the step 1 score, and I do care somewhat about the step 2. So I like to see it there. Again, it's not a deal breaker if you haven't taken it, but it's more likely to, and EM applicants almost never do worse on step 2 than they did on step 1. I would say it's the rare exception. So whatever you did on step 1, you're almost certainly going to do better on step 2.
Great. And for those who have not taken, the osteopaths who have not taken step 1, if they just decide to take step 2, would that be considered a red flag for any of you?
I'd be fine with that.
Okay, Barry?
Yeah, we're a program that de-emphasizes step 1, as we think the step 2 score probably better reflects how the medical knowledge is integrated in the clinical decision making. So yeah, no, we wouldn't have any problem if a DO student took only step 2. And again, we de-emphasize step 1 and look at that step 2 score. And I think it becomes more important this year. And from a DO perspective, we'd still give a long, hard look at the application, even if they didn't have a step score.
Great. A question came with a chat box, very similarly related. With COVID and delays and sometimes cancellation of steps, USMLE step tests, if it got delayed till later on, say October or November, how much of that factor would you guys consider that to be, or not consider that to be, at least from an initial evaluation standpoint? Barry, I'll turn that back to you to start.
Yeah, I think with the Dean's Letter or MSPE getting pushed back, I think the whole interview season gets pushed back a little bit. And, traditionally when we'd end interviews in beginning of January, I think we'll end up pushing a few more weeks into January and maybe into February as we take a long, hard look at applicants and try and get as best a feel we can in terms of how competitive they are side by side. So it's going to be a longer interview season. And it's going to be very different, obviously, than previous years.
Great, thank you. Next, we're going to go and meet some of our panelists again. Kevin, do you want to give a quick introduction and a little blurb about your program at Riverside?
Yeah, thanks, Barry. As I said already, we're a new program. Riverside has been considering emergency medicine for some time. My prior station in life, I was the program director at the Navy Hospital for 5 years, and I was the GME director of the DIO for 7 years. We grew that early program in emergency medicine, starting out as a new program there. When I arrived, it was 1 year old. So here I am now, We'll not say how many years later, but with the new program starting out again. I've been sort of a cheerleader for Riverside to start this residency for some time. And it just took, the institutional focus to finally get around to it, because the enterprise had expanded quite a bit, built 3 hospitals in like 5 years, redid the main facility. So everything is, in terms of a brick and mortar function is very new. It's a tremendous facility. The acuity is amazing. We're a level 2 trauma center with, level 1 across the river, so to speak. Functionally, we're almost a level 1 trauma center. I can't tell you the number of trauma patients we see every year, but it well meets the criteria for level 1, which is 1,200 a year. We have many of the subspecialists, just a couple short of that. We have a fantastic community hospital relationship with the community. Riverside has been there for a very long time and has had a long history of supporting GME. The family medicine program there is one of the first family medicine programs in the country. And Riverside has been there with, and for a while they had a nursing school. So we're very happy to join the GME family at Riverside. The hospital system just opened up a brand new 8,500 square foot simulation center. The director of that center is an emergency medicine resident that I trained that went on to specialize in simulation and is running that. So fantastic resource to emergency medicine as well as the other trainees there in the hospital. Like I said, we just started our first class of residents. They are happy, engaged, digging in, fantastic group, as I'm sure you all feel the same about your new classes as well. And they will be good ambassadors for the program as well. Many of them came from the audience that this group of medical students is present. So that will be another venue for people reaching out. They have their own website set up, and we'll find a way to publish that out as well. So again, very excited to have a new program up and running. Looking forward to class number 2 from 8 selectees from the audience.
Great, thank you. And congratulations for getting your program up and running. I know it's been a labor of love for a number of years for you guys. Next question has to do with interviews or tips for interviews. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think everybody in Virginia at least are going to be doing virtual. Is anybody doing, nobody's doing in-person interviews, correct?
Nope.
Right. So Joel, any tips in terms of the interviews for our med students? What to do, what not to do?
So one of the things to do, I definitely would say, is practice. If you've not had a lot of experience using Zoom, and God knows I keep making mistakes, and we've used it a lot ever since COVID happened. Just practice a little bit, set up some time. I think a lot of schools are going to set up practice interviews. At VCU, we do our first interview is just VCU students, so they have an opportunity to practice. But one of the things I think we all do badly is, like, I'm looking at Bruce's picture right now as opposed to up at the light in the camera. So it's a little bit of a thing that you have to get used to, and I'm still bad at it, but hopefully we'll get better by the time we do the interview. So, and you have to try to show your enthusiasm. I think sometimes that's hard to do over Zoom, but you really want to try to practice showing your enthusiasm for a program you care about, because it's going to be a different world and we're all going to have to adapt to it. But the best thing you can do is to be ready.
Amanda, thank you for that. Amanda, any other thoughts, comments about interview tips, do's and don'ts?
Yeah,
for this year?
Don't be too stressed about it all being perfect. I absolutely agree that you should practice and, do a phone call with a friend on Zoom and ask them if there are any weird things you do. Like, I have a tendency to touch my face a lot. And so maybe if you're if you're sitting in a chair in a room with someone, they're not going to notice that you're touching your face. But if you're on Zoom and they're, right in front of you and all you can see is their face, and then you go like this, like that is like what they're going to remember about you, that you had your hand on your head like this, which is not a weird thing to do, but it seems weird when you're on Zoom. So I think little things like that can really help, but don't stress too much about the environment. For example, I'm going to be doing all my interviews on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and those are 2 days that I don't have childcare, and my 2 kids are going to be in the house, and so there might be some interruptions. My APDs have even younger children, and so I think this is a season where people understand that things are not going to be perfect. Your internet connection, hopefully you should check it out. I think a good thing to invest in if you're going to spend money on something is a good internet connection, because you don't want it going out during your interview. But at the same time, there's like a minor unforeseen glitch. Like, maximize things to be as smooth as you can be, but I think everybody realizes that things are not going to be perfect. And I think on the flip side, be understanding of the programs that you're interviewing with, and that maybe those people interviewing you are interviewing with some constraints as well. So I think, this is a time for all of us to understand that people, the circumstances are not perfect. On the other hand, nobody cares what your socks look like. So spend your money on the internet and not on new socks.
Yeah, and just to clarify, when I
Thank
said
you.
practice, it was more with the format, not necessarily the content, because I think you can over practice and make yourself stress out. So I totally agree on that. But you just want to make sure that you know the basic operation of Zoom if you've never done it. I was in a meeting the other day with somebody, like, all I could see was his pores of his forehead. And I'm like, okay, this is not a great conversation to watch that the entire time.
I can only imagine. Thank you. Damon, similar question to your thoughts. Any other kind of tips, do's, don'ts, maybe what to wear, what not to wear, especially for this type of interaction as opposed to the classic in-person interview?
Yeah, I think there's even more pitfalls with the Zoom virtual for students, because it will be hard to sort of read the room as to what you're supposed to do. A couple of things that we've already talked about as faculty of advising students: don't abuse the privilege of the background for Zoom and have something weird or the Caribbean, something that's going to distract the person interviewing you, and you really want to display your character to them. I would pick a neutral, comfortable environment, and probably not overplay the background thing. I think a lot of programs, including ours, are going to go casual. Please don't wear a suit and tie for this. We're going to have a unique interview process where students can actually select when they want to interview with some of the faculty over a period of time, and actually choose some of the people they want to interview with, to give some flexibility. But that doesn't also give you license if that faculty member says, I'm going to be on my back deck, let's take it easy, to show up with a t-shirt. You really got to read that room, or you got to read sort of that and find a balance between coat and tie every single time. And if that's, say, please dress like you would for a business interview, that's important. But I think there's some pitfalls where people could really relax and suddenly they're in their chair, taking it easy and really not engaged in the interview because of the format. And that's going to be a little bit trickier.
Sure. So I think in emergency medicine, we're all probably a little bit more, I don't want to say casual, but not as maybe uptight compared to some other specialties. But at the same time, to Damon's point, there's a pitfall to be too casual. And we got to remember, this is essentially a job interview. So I think a certain degree of professionalism is going to be expected. Great, thank you. So let's talk about, go to our next program director and talk about a little about himself. Barry, do you want to give a little introduction about yourself and as well as at Eastern Virginia Medical School?
Sure. My name is Barry Knapp. I grew up in upstate New York. I attended the University of Southern California for undergrad. I went back to New York to Syracuse for medical school. Met my wife on the first day of medical school. And we ended up both couples matching into the Allegheny General Program in Pittsburgh as emergency physicians, and took our first jobs in the Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Eastern Virginia Medical School area, and have been there ever since. She currently is the Nightingale director. And obviously I'm the program director. And as you all probably know, Eastern Virginia Medical School is in Norfolk, Virginia, but our community kind of slurs with Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, and Portsmouth. We're located right along the coast. We're founded in 1981. So we're actually the oldest emergency medicine residency program in Virginia, with over 300 graduates in 32 states and multiple international sites. Primary teaching sites at Norfolk General with a volume of over 70,000 patients per year with a strong mix of blunt and penetrating trauma. We're obviously a level 1 trauma center, comprehensive stroke center. But one of the great things I think about our program is that our residents also rotate at Community Trauma Center, Sentara Virginia Beach General, as well as a more rural site at Sentara Obici Hospital. So it really gives our residents a great blend of both the academic center to all the way to the rural and busy community centers as well. So our residents are very well-rounded from a training perspective when they leave off and go into the real world. The program strengths, I would say, include a very, very strong critical care experience. We have some world-class ultrasound faculty. Children's Hospital of the King's Daughters is located right on the same site as our primary teaching hospital. And CHKD is one of only 2 level 1 pediatric trauma centers in the state. I mentioned strong critical care experiences, MICU, pediatric ICU, neuro ICU, cardiac surgical ICU. And we recently added an EMS experience that starts as a PGY1 that allows the physician with Virginia Beach Volunteer Rescue to become the duty physician and ultimately operate an EMS response vehicle independently. Lastly, we put emphasis on diversity. In fact, I'd like to congratulate Dr. Lowe for winning ACEP's Diversity and Inclusion Award this past year. I'll also put a strong emphasis on resident well-being. It's something that I know all the program directors on the call today certainly emphasize, but I just want to get it out there that we do too.
Great, thank you. I'm going to put the next question to you, actually, while you're on a roll there. So for this year, we heard a little bit already in terms of what people are kind of looking for, but you know, for this year in particular, what do you think is that you're really going to emphasize when reviewing applicants in terms of offering interviews and then even on your rank list? What kind of attributes or things on the application?
Yeah, I don't think that changes much. It's just going to be harder to dig out the personality as well to share our own personality of the program. You know, we'll look at their dean's letter. We put significant emphasis on the MSPE because it really reflects a body of work, 4 years of work or 3+ years of work. Obviously, we're going to put some emphasis on the EM SLO from their home institution. And again, we'll score with the interview as well. And step 2 will also be important as well. And we'll really, this year, really try and take a more holistic look at the application to try and get a better feel as opposed to kind of running the metrics like we've done in previous years and try and identify unique candidates that not only have been strong academically, but are really truly fits for emergency medicine and be a really good fit for our program.
Great. For the med students that are on, some of you have been typing in questions into our chat box. That's great. Feel free to continue to type those in as we continue on, and we'll kind of squeeze them in as we can. Along the same lines, Joel, I'm going to get you a chance to answer the question also. Anything different this year that you guys were focused on in terms of when you review applications and some things that you're going to focus on for applicants?
We always like to think that we try to look at applicants holistically. We try to avoid playing the numbers game. We don't have cutoffs, things like that, that some programs have. So we, I think, are pretty open to all kinds of backgrounds. Because we have, you know, again, such a, you know, vulnerable patient population, it's really important to me that people have a sense of importance to that. So, you know, people who are, you know, going to be good to their patients and going to be humanistic in medicine, in addition to obviously their likelihood overall to succeed, is something that's going to be important to us, and that's going to be unchanged than what we've done. So I'm hoping we don't vary very much from what we've done. We'll always look at for people who have similar values to what we have as a program.
Great, thank you. And I know you already gave a little bit of plug about your program, but I want to see if you have anything else you want to add more on a more formal basis about introduction to yourself as well as your program.
Sorry, I was confused with when you wanted us to do that. I thought we were going to do it all in a row. So I'm bad at following directions. That's one thing about myself, right? Anyway, you know, so we pretty much said, I mean, my background is that I'm originally from the Midwest. I went to University of Michigan for undergrad. I suffered through Ohio State for medical school. I got a great education, but I don't support the football team. I trained at Carolinas in Charlotte. And I've been at several different academic places throughout my career, been involved with academic medicine on national basis, and I've been involved with specifically both graduate medical education and diversity, equity, and inclusion, having been past president of the Academy of Diversity and Inclusion in Emergency Medicine for SIM. So and that's pretty much the story. We have a tremendous amount of growing faculty. Our program continues to grow. We've grown tremendously since 2015, and we're continuing to grow, including likely to be increasing our complement in the upcoming match from 10 to 12. We also have 2 Air Force people a year that we match. So we have lots of busy patients, and we're looking for lots of great residents to come.
Great, thank you. Kevin, I'm going to ask you the same question also. What do you are going to focus on this year in terms of when you review applicants and determining who you're going to interview and even who you may consider for a rank list? Anything in particular that you're going to focus on?
You know, we're going to be looking at all the same data points that we did last year. We're going to look at the medical student evaluations. You know, that, like as Barry said, that's a body of work. Realizing it's hard to take that and put that on trajectory of how well they'll do in emergency medicine. We'll obviously look at any standardized testing they've done, and we're just looking for something that will indicate a fit for our program, being a new program. For instance, this last year, just about every one of the residents that matched with us all had, as part of their interest and desire in emergency medicine, they were really excited to be part of a new program and shaping that, and being part of the building that culture, and they are doing that right now. So we'll look for some of that. Obviously, that's not a requirement. We're looking for somebody who's interested in emergency medicine, ideally somebody who we might want to hire on in a few years as one of our staff or faculty. Finding out something like, something in the application that leans towards that way, that it gives an indication that they're interested in coming back to the area, the particulars of why they're interested in emergency medicine and why they particularly like a hospital system like Riverside. We're going to pay attention to that.
Great, thank you. Damon, I'm going to ask you the same question also. I know you've answered a little bit at that previously, but specifically, what are you focusing on when reviewing applicants for your program? Or what elements will strike out to you?
I think in general, it's still going to be the fit and aptitude for emergency medicine. And that has to come across in a different way with your application in general for any program director who's on this panel or any program in the country. And those have to do with sort of looking at the SLO itself and saying, does my application reflect the SLO? That is commitment to the specialty, right? That's right there up at the top. And how do you demonstrate that in your application? We're going to be also looking for that. Specifically for our program, we have 4 different projects in our residency program. You have an education project, a scholarly project, community service project, and a quality improvement project. And you're going to work in teams to get those accomplished. But if your application doesn't reflect you actually working in projects or doing things outside of your rotations or doing well on your step scores, you're not going to do well at our program no matter what, because you're not going to like it. We traditionally find applicants who have dug in deep and really been productive, whether it's in community service. They've filled up some of those buckets that are outside of good clinical rotations and good academic scores. They have clearly extended themselves into medicine. So we're looking for those. We're also looking for service-minded people. It's a core mission to our institution and our organization, and improving the health of the communities we serve is really, for us, extending our residents out beyond the walls of the ED. So we're going to want to see that reflected in their application.
Great, thank you. Amita, any thoughts from you from UVA for the same question?
I think, again, it's just looking at, how can you indicate that you're a good fit for emergency medicine? Like what, and I think this is, a year where how you express that in your personal statement maybe might matter a little bit more to me. So, our hospital has a mission of serving a very underserved population. We have a lot of indigent patients. patients who drive 5 hours from Southwest Virginia to come to our ED because they don't have access to a primary care doctor. And so I really want to know, how are you going to interact with those patients? Like, are you going to feel like you're that the mission of the hospital is your personal mission, and that you want to participate in that? And I think that's also like the mission of emergency medicine in general. So in that sense, maybe we're not that unique, but at the same time, I think that that is like a very large percentage of what we see in our ED. And so I want to know that you are going to approach that with an open mind and wholeheartedly want to care for these patients and do the best for them. So any way that that can be expressed in your application, whether it's in your personal statement or in the activities that you chose, I think is going to help. And then just knowing that you're a hard worker. You know, one thing that I always look for is kind of like work experience outside of medicine too. And so, you know, if you were a server at a restaurant all through college for 4 years and that helped you pay your rent, put that on your application, even though maybe it doesn't seem that relevant to medicine. Because I think A, that shows me that you're a hard worker, and B, that you can actually empathize with some of the patients that you're going to be caring for in the ED.
Great, thank you. You brought up a good point, which is going to be my next question. I'm going to ask Barry to start off with this one, which is the personal statement. What are your thoughts on the personal statement, do's, don'ts? Is it going to be more important this year compared to previous years? Tell us your thoughts, Barry.
Yeah, I'd avoid bad language or gory graphics for the most part. You know, I do agree with Amita that there may be more emphasis as we have less objective data from EM rotations to really kind of dig into, you know, motivations as to why one might go into emergency medicine. So I think one of the traditional caveats that all the program directors will agree is really try and keep it to one page. Brevity is good when it comes to the personal statement, you know, as long as it kind of sums up why you want to go into emergency medicine and why you might want to go into a particular type of program.
Great. Anybody else? Damon, any words of caution or advice in terms of the personal statement, or any horror stories you'd like to share?
Well, I think everybody here has their top 10 worst personal statements. I think we could have a whole panel about that. Yeah, I agree. It's brevity is the brother of brilliance. When you get 1,000 applications, you know, last year we got 1,100 applications. A page and a half of a personal statement that simply reiterates the rest of your application from ERAS is really not doing yourself any favors. I also think that personal anecdote is powerful as long as it's kept in context. And that's sometimes where students tend to overreach. Your personal statement, you should have it read by at least 5 or 10 other people, not just for grammar, but really the experience of, do you believe, knowing me, I know Quan very well, I've known him for a long, long time, I should be able to look at that personal statement and say, gotcha, absolutely, nice job, versus you're not getting this across, it's reading wrong. Get that out there. And yeah, I would say don't start your personal statement was, there I was in the Congo and realized emergency medicine was my thing. Unless there is a very unique part of that that you can extend yourself back to, because that oftentimes can go a little sideways.
Good, thanks. Joel, any other comments to that, or any funny stories or experiences as PD with the personal statement?
Yeah, I mean, I'll avoid examples, but I agree. I mean, you know, not only would I have medical people read it, I think it's really important that non-medical people read it. Again, not know you personally, to see if you get across of it. Because, you know, it's not the time to be overly cute and funny, unless that's your personality and that's how you are. I mean, because sometimes people can be like, what the heck does that mean? So when they come across as weird, I think that's when it hurts you.
Great, thank you. So our last panelist we haven't heard from is Damon. Damon, you want to give a quick introduction to yourself and tell us more about your program at Carilion?
Yeah, thanks for having me on this. So I have been the program director here for 10 years. Did my medical school at the University of Minnesota after growing up in a rural farm community in northern Minnesota. I do play hockey, and I'm part owner of a hockey rink. I did my residency at Stanford and met a very pretty girl there who was one of my senior residents, and she is my lovely wife and director of psychiatric emergency services here. I did a fellowship in health services research and policy at OHSU, stayed on as faculty there afterwards, and then decided to move east and was lured to this wonderful place by a very persuasive and interesting individual named Nancy Agee. She's now our CEO. At the time, she was the chief operating officer, and convinced me of a very unique healthcare direction that this institution was going in, and everything promised has come and beyond. Nancy Agee, for those who don't know, is the 9th most influential health executive in the country, just behind the Director for Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. She was the former past president of the American Hospital Association, and she believes that the front door to Carilion Medical Center is the emergency department. Our organization is very unique in that we cover 15,000 square miles of space and are the only level 1 trauma center within hundreds of miles in any direction. So our catchment is extraordinarily wide, and the patient population we have is very diverse, including 35% African American, about 10% non-English speaking at our main site. But what we really promote also is the idea to train not only in a hub and spoke model of healthcare, but also get training in rural emergency medicine. So our residents spend several months out in a rural site, which is known as the moonshine capital of the world, where there's no OBGYN and it's considered critical access. They also get to work at a level 3 trauma center. And that's about a 45,000 volume true community site. And then our main hub, Carilion Medical Center, or CMC, which is now 90,000 patients a year. And we'll be expanding with our new project. The cranes are coming in a few months to make our emergency department 130 beds with a new ED critical care unit and new trauma unit, which is really exciting. I think the unique pieces of our training also are focused on the community service piece. It's a big part of it. We do have a very big academic focus here. About 40% of our graduates right now over the last 7 years have gone into fellowships ranging from palliative care to critical care to peds. And we really give the residents the support and the time to do those initiatives. And more often than not, people say, well, that's a pretty high rate of fellowship. I think it's just because they find something they're passionate in and they want to just keep doing it. So it's a fun place. Our faculty are incredibly happy. We have 60% of our faculty are women, and they come from all over the country. And again, we, just like many other programs, have continued to expand our faculty and are excited to add 3 new fellowship trained faculty that just showed up here in the last couple of months. So it's really neat.
Awesome, thank you. One question from the chat box has to do with programs doing open houses or some sort of social media type interaction for prospective students, either with residents or faculty. Can you guys comment on what you guys are doing in terms of that? And Kevin, I'll start with you on that question.
We don't have anything actively planned for that type of ongoing communication, although we do have, we've set up some social media accounts, Instagram and Facebook. I'm not really relying on that as a new program to be a method to communicate more about the program. I'm really more relying on contact with interested parties who want to rotate, and for applicants, again, as I mentioned, some personal contact this year is probably favorable. Also, our residents have their own kind of, like many programs have a website outside the wire, so to speak, for content, much of it protected, but some of it external as well. And we're supporting them developing that with doing some videos and profiles and things like that. So Um, that's about it.
Great, thank you. Joel, I saw you had an answer in the chat box, but want to give you kind of a chance to see what you guys are doing at VCU in terms of outreach, especially communications, whether it's through social media or some sort of Zoom session, what you guys are doing at VCU.
Yeah, so we're going to do an open house on September 16th, a virtual open house that we'll be advertising, the link and all that kind of stuff too, for people to sign up and do that. We're probably going to have also, in addition to that, obviously our EMRA stuff. Probably most of us are going to be in the EMRA virtual residency fair, and we'll have an opportunity to set up times to talk to people individually in our program if need be as well. And we're also going to be doing a week after interviews kind of wrap up in January about belonging at VCU. So we'll have specific dedicated breakout sessions so that people can ask, what would be potentially some more delicate questions that they, wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable, in the Zoom that they normally would ask at the resident dinners and things like that, or people who they feel comfortable to, disclose some more personal information. So that's going to be something I think that's going to be really helpful for them to get to know us and our character as well.
Great, Barry.
Bruce, one of the things that we've seen from students already going into emergency medicine is them reaching out individually to our residents that they see on our website. So along with some of the other initiatives that some of the other program directors mentioned, what we'll do is we'll make, because it's always nice to have a one-on-one informal chat with our residents kind of outside the whole interview time. So what we're going to end up doing is carving out some individual time where a student can sign up, and we'll post that on our Instagram account when and how. But carved out time to spend 10 or 15 minutes with one of our residents to get a one-on-one perspective, whether it be a PGY1, PGY2, PGY3, to get a little bit more information behind the scenes about our program.
Great, thank you. Amita, are you guys doing anything at UVA in terms of similar open houses or outreach?
Yeah, so we had an open house, I think it was last week, with our residents. Then there's something that our GME office has organized with an emergency medicine breakout room, although some of you are probably signed up for that, although I think it might be closed to new signups. And then next week, on Wednesday, we have one with me and the APDs and our program coordinator. And then I think going forward, our chief residents want to do a couple of Q&A sessions through interview season where people can kind of just drop in and ask questions. So these are all opportunities for all of you to learn about our program. Don't feel like you have to attend any of these to get an interview, to be considered for an interview. I'm not going to necessarily look through the list and say, oh, well, these people attended, so I'm going to be more likely to interview them. So, if you can't make it to any of these, it's okay. If you missed the one last week, that's okay. But if you do want to come and learn a bit more about the program, it's a good way to do it.
Bruce,
and Damon.
Bruce, I was going to say, I agree with Amita too. I wouldn't want students to feel that they have to continue to poke and attend all of these events. It's really about trying to get our program for you to get more about our program. A lot of the times that the app in the beginning of the application cycle, it can be found on, an Instagram account or a website. So don't feel you have to attend those. They're just extra opportunities for you to get to know us and the residents.
Great. Damon, you guys at Curlian?
Yeah, I would echo that. Don't feel obligated. If you already know, right, you're applying to Virginia Tech and you are hoping for an interview, no matter where you are in the country, I think that's an important piece to potentially communicate to us. But our afternoons are going to be sort of Fridays with our residents, and those will actually be during sort of the interview season. Because we're trying to get out sort of video packages early before people even apply, those will be all bundled within our website, but then there'll be opportunities to have one-on-one with alumni with connections of, do you want to chat with this person or connect with this person on a unique level because you're interested in Summer and her health policy fellowship or something like that. Because there's going to be so much more, I think, information and intensity about video tours and video content by programs, that we're sort of focused on. After that, you've gotten that whole big bundle of stuff. I agree with Joel, now you've seen all of our content, you've seen our show. What's it like living in Roanoke? What are the issues hurdles or talking and having discussions about wife's a teacher, my husband is an engineer. Being able to have additional time to ask those things throughout the interview season are really one of the things that we're going to be focusing on, and having those chats and those available for, basically we're calling them happy hours. So, because all our residents are happy.
Great, thank you. Next question has to do with couples matching. Any advice for this particular year in terms of couples matching? How many programs to apply to? Anything else they should be doing or focusing on? Joel, I'm going to start with you on this question.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question. In general, couples matching rates are pretty similar to overall rates. People tend to apply to more places, just because of the flexibility of it. And we certainly have people every year, as does every program, who couple match either within emergency medicine or, with another specialty. And I think you just have to look at the competitiveness of your application in emergency medicine. And if your spouse or significant other, if they're going into EM or another specialty, are they equally as competitive for that specialty or not? Because sometimes we'll see somebody who maybe, their spouse, is fantastic and they're good, but they're not, really nearly as competitive. And so they have to have a little bit more flexibility by applying to a little bit more places. And that's what I would say. I mean, if you're both really, really good on paper and in personable and interview well and whatever, you probably don't have to apply to a lot of places, quite frankly. And you can also leverage, if you have a really good interaction with somebody, let them know that you're couples matching. They probably should have figured that out based on your application. But sometimes, I've been able to get people interviews that maybe didn't get them already because we really liked the person, and then they wound up couples matching with us. And so, programs, I think, are willing to go to bat for that to what degree they can.
And you're referring to other departments. So if somebody's matching, couples matching, like emergency medicine, internal medicine, or
yeah, totally.
Emergency medicine, surgery.
Yeah, if there's a couple in emergency medicine and one is absolutely not somebody who would be successful in our program, I'm not going to interview either. I mean, that's just not fair from that standpoint, because, I want them to be together. I mean, wellness is incredibly important to us as well. And we bend over backwards to work with other programs to try to make sure their vacations line up and all those type of things. And the same with making sure they line up as far as where they're going to go. But yeah, to other departments.
Similar question. This one's going to be for Barry. How many, in general, for those who are not couples matching, how would you say, how many places should people be applying to for this year, especially since most interviews, if not all interviews, are going to be virtual?
Yeah, so I think there are some consensus recommendations, 11-ish interviews, maximum of 15-ish, but it really depends on your competitiveness. Those that are the most competitive could probably even do less. I think the one added benefit of this year is that students won't incur the cost of traveling throughout the country and staying in hotels. So I think that's one of the few positives of all of this. A lot of times that individual guidance can be given by the program director or clerkship director of the individual institutions, give them a little bit more guidance. But there's been certainly a push on the emergency medicine program director side to decrease the number of interviews that students are interviewing at, as most of the time in traditional years, most would get, one of their first 3 options.
Right. One of the questions that came across at a high level kind of theme is wellness. I mean, obviously a big focus the last several years, especially resident wellness. I'm just going to go around the different panels and just kind of briefly talk about what is your program doing in terms of focusing on resident wellness. And Kevin, I'll start with you.
Well, so, wellness can be construed as many things. I remember getting a pamphlet a year or so ago, go to a wellness conference. It was in Palm Springs. There was yoga and massage and golf. It sounded great. That's not life. I think most people would see that, although they probably filled up the conference. So, wellness is kind of a buzzword. I mean, when I hear wellness, I think resiliency. We have a very difficult profession in the sense of we handle patients at all aspects, every phase of life, every age of life, and it can be quite difficult. And plus, there's that circadian rhythm thing. So if you're not well at home, you're not well at work. If you're, as I use military parlance, if you're combat ineffective at home, you're combat ineffective at work. So, but it has shaped up to be more of a curriculum, if you will, and there are some very tangible skills that can be taught in terms of building resiliency, whether it's financial resiliency, physical resiliency, mental resiliency, and we try to incorporate that in longitudinally. Now, this is block 3, the third day of block 3 of our curriculum, so I'll take a little bit of the caveat that we have not executed that part very much because we just got it started. But I have 2 faculty that are dedicated as a that's in their swim lane, if you will, and they are building that curriculum. We template in some wellness event quarterly, and in September the residents have selected for their day of service to spend with one of the local food banks. That was their selection. They took it and ran. They've organized it. And they're very excited about it. So it is important for our specialty to have the skills to stay well for the entire length of the career. And we're doing everything we can from a micro level, whether it's shift scheduling and grouping, to a macro level of lifelong planning. I would be stunned to hear if there's any program that's not doing that, quite truthfully.
Great. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think this is what you mentioned is probably the playbook for most, if not all, programs currently in the country. Amita, any other thoughts in terms of resident wellness, what you guys are doing at UVA, or any other suggestions maybe for our students who are battling out currently in the current state?
Yeah, I think COVID obviously is going to have a huge effect on physician wellness, and I don't think we'll even know what that is until this is over, and maybe even for years to come after that. I kind of think of it as like the analogy that I like to think of as parenting. So if I have a kid that's having a hard time with something, one of my kids, that's okay. What I want is for when they're an adult that they'll be able to solve that problem well. And so I think what we really try to foster at UVA is that, yeah, you're going to have residency is hard and it's going to be rough and we're going to support you through it. But what I want to know is that 10 years from now, are my residents still going to be happy in emergency medicine? Are they going to have like a support system, and are they going to be able to seek out the help that they need if they do need it? And so I think the way that we do that is, one, by like trying to encourage people's passions within emergency medicine. So it's not just a job where you clock in and clock out, whether you're going into community medicine or academics, that you have something besides your day-to-day clinical work that keeps your interest in the field alive. And then we really try to foster connections between our residents. Our conference and our M&M, it's all about a supportive environment where people feel comfortable admitting their mistakes. It's about residents who reach out to each other, even if they don't have a lot in common socially, they do tend to all socialize together. And I think that's really like borne out across people's careers. So for example, the entire time that we've been dealing with COVID, I've been on a text group with some former residents who I was not even the APD when they were residents, I think until their last year. And so 5 of them, and then they included me in this group, and and a couple of them work in COVID hotspots now. And it's like really nice to see that they feel comfortable admitting to each other and to me, like the difficulties that they're going through. And so this has been like a really nice support group for that group of residents and for me. And so I think one of the things that we offer at UVA, and I'm sure that's true of all the other programs here, is a community that's going to go with you, for the rest of your life.
Great, thank you. Just a reminder for those who are on the line, if you have questions, please put them in the chat box and we'll be happy to try to get them in for our panelist experts. Barry, just briefly, from your perspective, resident wellness, kind of what's going on at EVMS?
Yeah, no, I agree with all the other program directors in terms of wellness on the macro level. I think it's the program director and the faculty that have to set a tone of or a caring nature within the program to bring a resident from medical school or just out of medical school all the way through residency. And there has to be that caring nature, or things can go sideways very, very quickly for a resident. So on a micro level, we have a resident to run, though faculty involved, resident wellness and resilience committee. We fund the committee as well for monthly events, and we've been very adamant that it's not a social committee, even though at times some of those funds will be used to go out to dinner or events like that, but also to brainstorm from a mental health perspective, to bring psychiatrists in, to do relaxation techniques, massage, yoga, those types of things, I think are opportunities. I think giving the residents the ability to make those choices and really trying to define wellness as the bigger aspect as opposed to kind of the social aspect of emergency medicine residency.
Great. Joel, I'm going to ask you similar, but I'm also going to ask you, Joel, there's a question in the chat box regarding diversity and URIMs. And if you want to comment, at least what's going on at VCU, I know you mentioned earlier a little bit some of your initiatives, but maybe focusing on also about how people who are URIMs and what you guys are doing in terms of diversity initiatives again.
Yeah, so again, I mean, one of the things we do, again, we approach everything holistically. So we don't have numbers and cut off. We want to really get to know the individual, and that includes, our recruitment efforts to get people, who are traditionally underrepresented in emergency medicine, not just medicine, because emergency medicine, unfortunately, statistically, is way more of a whiter and male specialty than a lot of the specialties in the House of Medicine. So it's important for us to have a representative community. So part of that, we have a health equity scholarship that was, well, I call it a scholarship. It's really more of a reimbursement program. So for people who are interested in health equity, they can rotate, and we will provide them some reimbursement for their costs to rotate with us. We thought that was going to get sidelined by COVID this year, but fortunately we have somebody starting in a couple of weeks who was awarded that opportunity. And I think that's really important to do that. We like to make it, again, one of the first slide literally in my presentation is about how everyone is welcome to attend VCU, regardless of who you are, your background, where you come from, or who you love. And I think it's really an important thing to state that up front as a mission and a value, because again, to the point of climate, as far as wellness and culture of wellness, you have to have the same culture of accepting, equity, not necessarily equality, but equity. And I think it's really important that people understand that this is a mission, this is a value, and this is something that is so fundamental to emergency medicine, because we truly see all comers and all kinds of people. And by understanding, by reflecting our patients, by people understanding and meeting people that they maybe have not met before, interacted with before, we're all going to become more culturally agile in our ability to care for people. And that's so important when you don't have a lot of opportunity to bond with somebody. So so we're doing a lot of things, both within and without the program. But the most important thing is, I think, that as a fundamental mission and value.
Great. And Damon, anything you want to add from a Curlian standpoint, either in terms of wellness or diversity?
Yeah, I think I'll echo the rest of what the panelists has already said in terms of wellness, which, for our institution, obviously COVID was tough. We took our interns out of that environment and moved them to a different unit to work one-on-one with the attendings. And that really, we backed off on our third years and the number of shifts they had to do, and shortened them while they're working in our critical care pods with the COVID units. And the focus for us has been obviously a little bit on scheduling. We hired actually a professional scheduler just for the residents, which has really helped out a lot. And specifically, we're trying to focus our curriculum around tools to give them, and using, a focused time and space for that goes beyond obviously bar night and making sure they have enough time to get together with their friends at, the brew pub. That still happens, but giving them, like, for the whole month of August, we cancel conferences, and it's all resident initiative and led for wellness. Just this past week, you can look at our Facebook post, but they were given hours and funding to go do a gardening project all together. And it's really an important piece to make sure that you're checking in constantly with them about their hobbies and their interest outside of it. And again, I agree with, Kevin, about that resilience piece and making sure that you're giving them those tools. In terms of diversity, I can't stress that enough. It's a huge focus for our program, and ensuring that you represent the patients we serve, which are the very rich and the very poor. 25% of our population has no ability to pay, but there's 25%. This is the place they come because they're the CEO of Advanced Auto. That goes much farther beyond that in trying to also look, I saw the comments about URM, and I think those pieces really resonate with us and the place we have for those, because of that service-oriented mission and vision that we have, not only in our residency program as leaders, but also taking our specialty outside the walls of the ED into the community. And it's a critical piece and a value to our entire organization that we echo in our training program.
Great, thank you. We did have one question in the chat box that has to do with people who are potentially interested in doing fellowships post-residency. Is that something that they should emphasize on their application? Should they highlight that or bring that out either in their application or interview? And should that be also maybe a consideration of where they apply to? And Amita, I'll kind of turn that question to you first.
Sorry, would you mind just clarifying what that question was? About fellowship? Yeah.
Fellowship, yeah. Should they emphasize fellowship, that they're interested in doing fellowships post-residency? And then on top of that, I would ask is, should that be even a focus of where they apply to having a similar type fellowship, or should that not be really much of a consideration?
I think it doesn't matter whether they say it in their personal statement or say it in the interview. I don't think that's going to have a lot of bearing on whether they get an interview. And, with emergency medicine, certainly, there's a talks fellowship at the program you're interviewing at. You could say that that's one reason you might want to go there, but you don't need to I think as applicants, you don't need to go to a program that has a particular fellowship if you're interested in applying to that fellowship. I mean, I think certainly, with looking for mentors, that's a potential issue, but I think more importantly, with the program that you're going to support you rotating at. So for example, if you interview somewhere without a talks fellowship and you're going to go there for residency and you're interested in talks, is that residency going to support you doing a rotation at a program during your residency that has a talks fellowship? So I think that's actually probably more important. Example that we don't have a critical care fellowship at UVA, but we've had multiple residents go into critical care and successfully match. So I think you want to express that interest in your fellowship because it shows that you have have thought about your future career, but at the same time, I don't know that should limit where you apply or where you think about doing your residency. I think you should go to the place that's the right fit for you, but you do want to make sure they would support that career interest of yours.
Great, thank you. Well, I know we're almost out of time. What I want to do is give a little bit of time for each of the program directors to give maybe some last minute kind of closing remarks or last bit of advice for our med students. And Barry, I'm going to start with you on this.
Thanks, Bruce. So the one thing that I think gets missed in all of this is the anxiety from a student level, having only done one emergency medicine rotation. And I think at least the second rotation, and for some it's even more, it really reaffirms emergency medicine and reaffirms emergency medicine outside of their home institution. So my sense is there's probably some student anxiety about that. Well, I've seen emergency medicine, but I've kind of only seen it in one area. I can attest to you that emergency medicine is an amazing specialty. All of us have been doing it for a long, long time. Emergency medicine almost chooses you, and you can feel it that first time you're down in the emergency department. So despite the limited exposure that some of you may have, we can guarantee it's an amazing profession, one that has longevity, that has an amazing clinical experiences both in and out of the hospital. Look forward to all of your applications and hope to see you guys soon.
Awesome, thank you. Kevin, any last words of wisdom for our med students?
Just to say that I think pretty much speaking for all the program directors in the country, I think most people realize that this is a very difficult year. And even though we, from a program standpoint, have tried to sort out what's the best way, what can we do, should we do this, should we do that, I think really most people realize that at the end of the day, the student applicants that are wanting to go into emergency medicine have been put in a very, very difficult situation. And there's not necessarily going to be any one formula that fits, whether you can get 2 slows or 1 slow or even no slows. This year, I think your application is going to get a little extra closer look because of that, because this has put us out of our comfort level probably more than out of your comfort level, because you're just doing this for the first time. We're used to doing this over and over again in terms of looking at the applicants. So I think the anxiety that this generates is justified. And probably most people say, don't worry about it so much, but do your best. This is different. We're going to look at your application very carefully, and we're going to take all that into consideration, whatever you come up with in terms of what you can do. There's some questions on there about, will I be penalized for this? Will I be penalized for that? I think most program directors are going to weigh in the events of this past year, which are historic. And I would say, although it's easier to say than to feel, don't be so worried about it, because your worry is justified. We understand. And we realize that the weight of this is on you much more than it is on the programs.
Great, thank you. Damon, any last words of wisdom for our folks and our attendees?
Calm down, take a deep breath. It's gonna be fine. It is a challenge for all of us, and I think the system is it's gonna work for you as candidates. I promise you that. It's our job as PDs to find candidates who will succeed in our programs. It's your job to really do the best you can to project those qualities that you want programs to see, but it's still ultimately your choice, and that's important. You're in a good sales position. Right now, it's a buyer's market, and what you're selling, we're buying. I think the other piece is I try to remind everybody it's going to be an interesting interview season, but make sure you have fun with it and realize it's one of the coolest things that you'll ever do in your career, period. I have lots of residents who do fellowships. They go and they interview at 2 or 3 places and maybe 5, and they're like, man, that's the one. But you're going to get to go and interview at 10 to 12, maybe 15, that's a little high, programs, and meet really extraordinary leaders in emergency medicine who have really set standards for research, and the people you're going to interview with. It's going to be really cool. And I would say, don't forget about that part of it, how fun it is to meet true, leaders and the people who are setting the standards in emergency medicine, that it is really still an extraordinary experience. So don't be too nervous and scared of it. Know that this is really going to be something cool that you get to do, and you really, really need to enjoy it. I look forward to your application.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Amita,
Yeah,
final thoughts.
I think don't stress about this. It is, the ratio of programs to applicants is not going to be different just because there's a pandemic. So there's going to be a spot for, if you were going to match in a normal year, you'd match this year. And if you're worried about, oh, well, I might not have matched where I would have matched, just remember that, emergency medicine is a field where there are a lot of really great programs. And what we have to teach in emergency medicine and the way we teach it is pretty well prescribed by the RC. And so, you don't go to residency in Florida, but you still have to learn about hurricanes. Maybe you're not gonna be somewhere where there are explosions, but you still have to learn about blast injuries, because we're teaching you to practice emergency medicine anywhere in the country or really anywhere in the world. And we all have to do that. And so wherever you end up, you are gonna end up with good training. Each of the programs in Virginia, for example, are good for a different reason. Like we're each unique in our own way. And so just, let the process play out the way it's going to play out. Don't worry too much about, am I going to get my first choice? Am I going to make a good impression on my first choice? Just try to, enjoy the process and put your best foot forward, but don't worry about how this whole Zoom thing is going to affect your future. It's a 3-year residency. You will get good training and you will be an emergency physician at the end of it. regardless of whether this was being done on Zoom or it was a normal year.
Great, thank you. Last but not least, Joel, final thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I would just definitely echo everything everyone else has said. I think, hopefully you're hearing a very uniform message from us as program directors within Virginia. I think we all have a lot of respect for each other and respect for each other's programs. And I definitely agree with Amita that each program's a little bit different. So I think that means that there's probably a really good fit for everybody. I think it's incredibly important that you be true to yourself. As much as we want and strive to get somebody who's going to be successful at our program, we all want people who are going to be happy at our program. And really that fit term is more in you than it is in us. And so I want to get to know people and understand them, to try to help me know them and because it's interesting. It's one of the best things about doing this is you meet a lot of really amazing people from our side talking to medical students and applicants to our programs. And so, don't be afraid to be who you are, because you want to be who you are when you go interview. You want to be who you are, obviously with some respect, but you want to be who you are too, when you're in your program. I mean, if you want, talk to a program that you're not comfortable being who you are, then why would you want to be there? So I think that's a really important caveat. So please remain true to yourself.
Great, thank you. Well, unfortunately, we're at the end of our time for our webinar today. I want to thank Sarah and Kwan for all your help putting this together. Without their tireless work, we would not be able to have this webinar. I would especially like to thank our panelists, our 5 program directors who made it today, take time out of their busy schedule, as well as time away from their family to do this. And lastly, I want to thank all the attendees, the students who are out there, and want to reiterate kind of what everybody's saying, which is, it's definitely a different time. It's scary, it's stressful, but have fun with it. I mean, this is a unique time. You guys are going to do well. If there's any other questions, feel free to reach out to any of us. We'll have some slides we'll send out to you guys, including with contact information. But be well, be safe, and we will see you guys soon. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thanks.
Thank you.